So we're getting ready for the call to action. As the drivers snap on the safety locks, and here's the call for... That means action as the engines fire and the crowd settles down, and we're getting ready for the run at the Firecracker 400. The field of 40 NASCAR Grand National stock cars settling behind the pace car. Bobby Isaac sits on the pole, having qualified at 186.27 miles an hour. David Pearson on the front row with him. So the front row is Dodge and Mercury. Right behind them, Richard Petty driving a Dodge, and Buddy Baker, his teammate. In the third row, it'll be Bobby Allison and Pete Hamilton. Cuckoo Marlin and Joe Frazone right behind them. A very quick field on a very hot day.
It could be an interesting race from a speed standpoint, Keith. The heat has forced the mechanics into a compromise. They had to open up the ducting to permit cooling, and in so doing, slows the car down. Now the mechanics had to decide how much to open and how much to leave closed. We'll see what happens when the green drops.
The pace car driven by Darrell Duringer off the track, waiting for the green. And here it is. We go racing at Daytona. Down low, that's Jackie Oliver going down on the pit apron almost to get by two cars, so he's learning quick, isn't he? Meantime, watch Buddy Baker, car number 11, coming out of the fourth position and streaking into the lead. Low inside passes. Pearson and Baker will lead on the first lap.
When you can get by David Pearson just a few yards from the start-finish line, you've got a machine that performs.
The big boys are up front, as we told you, and you see them now starting to jockey for position. It's Petty and Pearson. Look like they almost bumped as they came whistling into that turn behind Buddy Baker. The big red Dodge with a big man from Carolina. Number 11 has the lead. Pearson settles into second spot. Petty is third, and Pete Hamilton running in fourth spot right now.
The pole man, Keith Jackson, is out of the picture already.
Bobby Isaac dropping off the pace, and the pole sitter has never won this race. At least not since it became a 400-mile race.
We've got 7 cars moving away from the second echelon. These are the class of the field, Keith.
Cuckoo Marlin, who qualified in the number 7 position, and Cuckoo is hanging on to that spot right now. But everybody is chasing Buddy Baker. Buddy had an unusual thing happen to him the other day. He was getting out of his car in a tight parked area, bumped his head, took 5 stitches to sew up an ear. Meantime, David Pearson moving up, drafts Baker, goes by him. Now watch him drift toward the top of the track, toward the wall, and he holds on.
You know, Keith, you can only do that with a driver that you know very well. You wouldn't try that with a stranger. He cut it right across his bow there, but these Southern boys race together virtually every Sunday, and they know each other's tricks. Baker will probably get even before too many more laps go by.
It's Pearson, it's Baker, and Petty in that order right now.
Petty has switched from a Plymouth to a Dodge for aerodynamic considerations. The tremendous heat today. Oops, there goes Baker down underneath Pearson.
Petty moves right in behind Pearson. So Buddy Baker, bidding for the lead, gets the pass and slides up toward the wall in that easy drift. And Pearson gives him enough room. And meantime, you see Petty closing right in behind David. But the swapping of the lead so far has been a game between David Pearson and Buddy Baker. Richard Petty has not made a run for it, and Pete Hamilton running right behind Richard Petty at this point.
Petty has had a great season, Keith, but we wonder about the man's physical capabilities anymore. He takes oxygen now before some of these races on hot days, and after a race on a hot day, he always takes oxygen. We hope he can make it through the full 400 miles today.
Here's Pearson moving up out of the draft, trying to slingshot Baker. He's got him, so David Pearson goes back into the lead. And so far, every pass that we have had in the race has come at turn number 3, going into the third turn.
That's interesting. There's hardly any wind, certainly nothing that could affect the handling of the cars. They're so evenly matched that it boils down to how much bravura you have, how much you respect the man in front of you. Do you dare go underneath him? And the one place to do that is at the end of that long back straightaway, considered the fastest ride in American stock car racing.
The record for the Firecracker 400 is 167.2, set by Cale Yarborough back in 1968. It is conceivable here today, without the yellow flag, with a minimum of caution lights, these fellows could break that record. They have started in that direction, but of course it is a long afternoon. And again, we see Buddy Baker moving out of the draft, going low, sliding up toward the wall, and he goes back into first place.
Keith, I just checked my watch. They're turning laps at exactly 180 miles an hour. That's 6 2/10 miles an hour off the pole speed.
And the Firecracker 400 will continue in just a moment. The Firecracker 400 on ABC's Wide World of Sports, and David Pearson has moved back into the lead with Buddy Baker running second. Richard Petty is third. Baker moving out, trying to make a pass on David Pearson. Moving out into the draft, going by him, wobbles some, and I don't think, no, he cannot get by him. So Baker got loose there for a moment.
Got a left front wheel down just where the banking ends and the apron begins. And we've got a great battle of the brands, Keith. We've got 2 Dodges and a Mercury in the first 3 positions, a Plymouth 4th, and a Chevrolet 5th. The Mercury is 71 model, the rest new cars.
Pete Hamilton running in 4th spot now. Bobby Allison has moved up to 5th. Bobby Isaac dropping to 6th, and Cuckoo Marlin running 7, and the drafting continues. Drafting is a very tricky thing here at Daytona, Chris.
It's an interesting phenomenon how aerodynamics have entered the sport of automobile racing. Drafting is a situation where 2 cars come up together. One car alone not only has to break wind, but it also has to pull a vacuum behind its trunk area. But when another car pulls in behind, it fills that vacuum area, and the air from the top of the first car continues over the top of the second car. When it comes off the trunk lid of the second car, only one vacuum area is created. In this graphic, we can see how the wind goes over one car by itself, a little vacuum back there, and then when 2 cars are together, the air continues over. Really, 2 engines are used to push one car through the air. Before the race, I talked to Buddy Baker about drafting.
Well, Chris, there's several things that enter into the picture today. One thing is real close drafting will run the car hot. So, if you see any real erratic passing patterns going on, it's because the second car is running hot and he has to get out in the lead long enough to cool the car back down. So this will be the pattern of the day. You'll see them laying back 4 or 5 car lengths, braking to the side, anything to get fresh air into the radiator of the car, because I went out yesterday afternoon. It was in the mid-90s. I was running 180 degrees on the water, and got under Bobby Isaac for 2 laps and went to 220 on the water in 2 laps. So you can imagine what 400 miles would do it that way. I think it would have probably went right on out of sight if I'd have stayed tucked under him.
Out on the racetrack, the man making a move right now is Bobby Allison in car number 12. Allison moving by David Pearson on the draft. He just flew by him, and now he is in second place and challenging for the lead. So Bobby Allison, having another great year, is up in second spot now and looking at first.
Well, it's time for refueling and perhaps some tire changes as the pit signals go out. They're calling Buddy Baker in 2 laps. It's interesting, Keith, that the men are almost as important, in some cases secondary, to the name of the car that's out there. The fans here in the South like those brand names.
The battle between Allison and Baker. Bobby trying to grab the lead, couldn't do it. Buddy pulls away as Bobby settles back into the number 2 position. We're coming up on the first group of pit stops. We've had no yellow flags so far, and here comes Bobby Allison going by Buddy Baker, and he has the lead. So Bobby Allison goes into first place.
And now the responsibility will shift from the track to the pit area. The stopwatch is going to mean a difference here. With no yellow flags, the pitmen will really have to work fast. This is going to see a green flag pit stop.
We'll have more of the Firecracker 400 in a moment. Now here come the pit stops under the green flag. There will be a shuffling of leadership as Buddy Baker, among the first of the leaders, to head toward the pits, and before his car really stops rolling, they've got their hands on it, and before the jacking is completed, the tires are off.
These boys really know what they're doing. Richard Petty's brother, Maurice, is crew chief on this car.
Notice that they're scrubbing the vent there in front. That's very important on a day like this because they're dealing with such extreme heat. So very fine pit stop for Buddy Baker, 21 seconds. Now let's watch the famous Woods brothers go to work for a moment.
David Pearson, the man here. The jack is located strategically in the middle of the car, so only one jack is needed to lift the right side, and here's the battle for the lead now.
Bobby Allison has the lead, and it's Pete Hamilton in the white car trying to pass him, but he's blocked off by a slower car down low on the track. So Bobby Allison, continuing to run, retains the lead on the racetrack, but he's got a pit stop coming.
There's a Chevrolet out front. We've had a Plymouth out front and a Dodge. Now Allison goes to the pit.
And Hamilton right behind him.
Pearson was away in about 20 seconds. A quick stop by the Wood brothers.
So let's watch Bobby Allison as he slides into his pit lane, and here is Hamilton pulling in right behind him.
Notice the rake on the car, nose down, rear end up, and it's busy in the pits. This is green flag action, Keith, and the pits are really busy.
Here's Cuckoo Marlin, and we almost runs into the side of that red car coming down. Almost ran into Bobby Isaac.
Marlin gets out. Marlin is doing very well this year. He's got a new Chevy Monte Carlo. Uh-oh, trouble. When the hood comes up on a routine pit stop, there's the hose. Pete Hamilton, who's been off the circuit for more than a year, in trouble.
Generally, that means overheating. So the conversation goes on at Pete Hamilton's pit, and as Chris said, the hood is up, and that's bad news.
Here's what the driver gets, Keith, on a pit stop. He has a choice of an aspirin tablet or a salt tablet, a soft drink, or a cup of water. The water, if it's not drunk, is always thrown over the face or down the back of the driving suit on a hot day like today. That's Richard Petty getting the service. Remember now, he switched for many years in a Plymouth to a Dodge for aerodynamic considerations. He's in a Dodge today.
And he clears the pits in a good time, so Richard Petty is back out.
These 20-second pit stops don't really reflect how much time is lost, Keith. Slowing down and getting back up to speed take just about 50 seconds, the speed of a good lap here at the Daytona International Speedway. It's 2.5 miles around, so when you make a pit stop under the green, you lose just about a lap, give or take a couple of hundred feet.
So our standings are Pearson, Baker, and Allison. Right now, let's turn to Howard Cosell and another subject. Young Bobby Hunter, the amateur boxer trying to make his way to the Olympic Games from his jail cell in South Carolina.
We're back at the Daytona International Motor Speedway as we continue our coverage of the Firecracker 400. I'm Keith Jackson along with Chris Economaki. And Chris, we're boiling right along in a boiling heat wave.
Well, it's past halfway, Keith. No yellow flags, and the speed is 176.1 at the halfway mark. And only one of the top drivers out of the race, Pete Hamilton, due to overheating. It's a strange race. 176 is slow for Daytona. And yet the drivers say the track is very slippery. They come in there queasy about it. It's a hard one to pick.
It'll get slicker, though, as the day goes on.
That's right. They say that the sun is drawing oil out of the asphalt, and then the overheating problems, some of the cars are spilling fluid on the track. It must be mighty treacherous out there. Yet there's no yellow flags yet.
Chris, it looks like we may have lost another car. Bobby Isaac has been in the pits for some time. They've been working on it with a hood up and everybody walking around with a long face, so Isaac may be through for the day.
That slow pace there makes me think you're right, Keith.
Meantime, out on the racetrack, it is anything but slow as Bobby Allison closes on Buddy Baker in a battle for second place. David Pearson is your leader. And Bobby Allison now closing right behind Buddy Baker in a position to take a shot at him. There he goes, and he's got him. So Bobby Allison goes into second. David Pearson is in first. Buddy Baker now third, and Richard Petty, who gave up the lead on a pit stop, is running in fourth spot. Bobby Isaac is out of the race. Let's spend a moment with Bobby and Chris Economaki, find out what happened.
Going in, Bobby, did you know that no man has ever won this race that started on the pole?
Well, that's what they told me, and I tried to change that, but really, my car didn't run good from the start. I don't know why. I had qualified good and run good in practice, but put a new engine in, and it just didn't go good.
How hot is it?
Well, it's pretty hot. The track's pretty slippery. Probably has the speed down more than 180 miles an hour, I would imagine.
Well, off to the showers. Better luck next time.
Thank you.
So we've got two of the big ones out of it. Pete Hamilton going out earlier, and Bobby Isaac through for the day. Bobby Allison now running down pit road, heading for a pit stop under green. Under green. Expensive when you have to go in with that green flag out, but the Allison crew out there in a hurry. And smoke coming out of Buddy Baker. Smoke boils out of there, and that normally means he's cooked an engine. He was high up on the wall. He's bringing it down. And Richard Petty running right behind him, comes off the face a little bit, slowing up in case it is slick up there, but Baker stays on his throttle, gets his car out of the way. Great piece of driving by Buddy Baker. Oftentimes when you dump an engine, you dump oil, and that immediately brings out the first yellow flag of the afternoon. So the yellow is out, and we'll be back with more of the Firecracker 400 in a moment. The yellow flag remains out in the Firecracker 400, and we're getting a succession of pit stops, including David Pearson and the Woods Brothers Mercury pulling in right there. Car number 2, that's Dave Marcus coming in for a pit stop. Remember, just before Buddy Baker had his problem and caused the yellow flag, Bobby Allison had come into the pits under green, and that has cost Bobby Allison a lap. David Pearson getting a drink of water, getting a cold, wet towel to go around his neck. The Woods brothers hurrying, trying to get the car out. They want to get fresh rubber on all four wheels. You notice the NASCAR official is right there with them as the cars come in and off pit road. Scrubbing down the front, rubbing off the windshield, the NASCAR official, George Clark, holding them up now as they have gone around and checked. You go back to that right front, so apparently George had spotted something wrong over there. Perhaps one of the lugs had been broken. Meantime, let's check with Chris and find out what happened to Buddy Baker.
Buddy, you look like you had a fright.
Well, it didn't really scare me or anything. Left front tire blew out going down the front straightaway, and boss man was right behind me, and had he not been there, I could have slowed up and pulled over on the curb. Maybe not hurt the car quite as bad, but it would have caused an accident if I hadn't have stayed on the throttle long enough to let him pass. So we're just real lucky, and we'll be back next time with a lot more, I hope. But
what happened to the car after you had to stay on it when you would have liked to have gotten off it?
Well, the left front tire separated then, threw all the tread up into the oil cooler and busted it. But I'm standing here, and Richard's still running, so we did the right thing any way you look at it.
How much of the oil got on Richard's windshield?
I don't think he could see anything, really. He just slowed up, and everybody behind him, thank goodness, slowed up. And these guys are really, they know what to do when something happens anymore. You don't see this. If that had happened in 1960, everybody on the racetrack would have been in the accident. But as it was, there was no incidents at all. But these guys do a good job of missing wrecks and everything else now.
Buddy, if it had been somebody else behind you, would you have had your eye in the mirror as close as you did when it was Richard?
I'd have panicked, probably.
So Buddy Baker heads for the shade tree, and the green flag comes out, and we're racing again here at Daytona with David Pearson, car number 21, leading. Richard Petty, number 43, is in second place. They're the only two cars in the same lap right now. Bobby Allison is running third right behind him, and Bobby is a lap down. And Chris, how many cars do we have out of it so far?
17 are out of the race, Keith, and all but Elmo Langley, who went out with a hub malfunction, have engine troubles or engine-related troubles. Joe Pearson, Neil Castles, Benny Parsons, Pete Hamilton, Isaac Baker, all out of it with engine trouble.
Bobby Allison now is closed up right behind Richard Petty. He's got to try to unwind himself. In effect, he has got to pass both Petty and Pearson in order to get back on the same lap.
That's going to be a very paramount thing in his mind, Keith, because if he can get past those two cars and the yellow flag comes out, he's in clover.
This is a NASCAR sanctioned event, Grand National Stock Car Racing, and tomorrow the Dixie 500 goes in Atlanta, Georgia. August 6th, it'll be the Talladega 500. August 20th, the Yankee 400 at Irish Hills, Michigan. And September the 4th, the Southern 500 in Darlington, South Carolina. Right now, let's fix our eyes on Bobby Allison and try to anticipate his move here as he goes up alongside of Petty. Can he hold his position as he slides up toward the top, and he is in second. Physically in the second place spot now, but he's still got to get by Pearson in order to unwind himself. I would guess at this moment, Chris, the temperature inside those automobiles probably around 155 to 160 degrees.
Unbearable, I should think. The tempo and the temperature are matching right here. A couple of interesting sidelights. 2 Ford drivers back in the field have moved into the top 10. James Hilton and Donnie Allison, who's driving a Torino with a small 351 cubic inch engine, is doing well.
Right there, it's David Pearson, Bobby Allison, Richard Petty, but Allison is still a lap down to the leader. David Pearson here, he's making his move to go by Pearson. Can he hold it? Going into turn number 3, and he has unwound himself. So David Pearson is the leader. Richard Petty is second, and Bobby Allison is running third. Chris, it seems to me that this is kind of a tough time on those 3 front runners having to run this hard this late in the race.
It's hot, and the sun has drawn a lot of the oil out of the asphalt. The track is slippery. There's no question about it, but that's automobile racing.
What was that line you said? This is what they call a He-Man auto race?
That's right. Down here, it's a He-Man auto race, and it's a good one. Bobby Allison has just passed the 2 leaders. He's a few feet in front of them, and he's hoping for a yellow flag so he can go around and tackle on the back. In the meantime, David Pearson and Richard Petty are really fighting it out for number 1.
Now, this is one of the interesting things about NASCAR Grand National Racing, that should Bobby Allison get a yellow, he can go all the way around, close right up behind the leaders, be right in it.
That's right. The safety car gets in front of the leader, slows the field down, and everyone else stacks up. It's a plus for Allison. It hurts the leader.
Moving through traffic. On that straight, the leader's probably running up around 177 to 182 miles an hour. They're not quite as quick in this particular race as we've seen him in previous races, particularly in the 500. Here is a fellow who's had his moments of glory on the super speedways, Leroy Yarborough, coming off a lengthy siege with Rocky Mountain spotted fever, but at least he's got his health back now, and as soon as I think he gets a competitive car, we'll hear a great deal more from Leroy Yarborough.
He was lying sick going into the pit.
David Pearson, Richard Petty, Bobby Allison, that order, more after this. As we continue our coverage of the Firecracker 400, we have our second yellow flag of the race. Frank Warren, car number 79, smoke pouring out of his car, probably blown an engine. Frank will ease it down off that 31-degree banking, get it out of the way, and hopefully not drop too much oil on the racetrack. And big chunk of something has fallen off somebody's automobile out there, so they'll clean that up too. But this could be a big break for Bobby Allison. Let's go down to pit road and Chris.
Well, this is the moment that any race driver with a competitive car that is a lap down prays for. In this case, Bobby Allison. The yellow came out just as he was in front of the leaders, not quite a lap behind. With a safety car holding the leaders, David Pearson, Richard Petty to a slow pace, Allison now has the opportunity to move his number 12 Chevrolet completely around the track and tack on the tail end of the pack. And when the green comes out, then we're going to see a three-man race, hopefully to the finish.
Car numbers 21, 43, and 12. Those are the three numbers you want to be watching, and now the leaders are easing toward probably their last pit stop of this 400-mile car race. Petty, the red and blue. David Pearson with the Woods Brothers Mercury comes to a stop, and boy, they go to work in a hurry, don't they? They have become a legend in NASCAR Grand National Stock Car Racing, and of course this Petty bunch, they're pretty quick too. Richard's crew headed by Dale Inman. So we have just about everybody who can get in there coming in for a pit stop now. Cuckoo Marlin, the fellow who came squirreling in there and got stopped right between the two leaders. 4 new tires going on both Petty's car and Pearson's car. They're getting all the fresh rubber on it they can. That fresh, cold water going into the cockpit for the drivers. The temperature got to be right around 160 degrees. Now David Pearson comes out and Petty comes out right behind him. So they will leave the pits the way they came in, with Pearson, Petty, and Bobby Allison. Cuckoo Marlin is running 4th, James Hilton 5, Leroy Yarborough 6, Ron Keselowski 7, and Donnie Allison is 8. The yellow flag is still out. While the yellow is out, let's go to ABC's Wide World of Sports Control now. Join Bill Fleming and Larry Evans for a report on the World Chess Championship. Thank you very much, Bill. Just saying Iceland makes me feel better. Meantime, here in hot Daytona, we're back under green and racing, and I do mean racing. Richard Petty, David Pearson, Bobby Allison, bumper to bumper. We've got less than 35 miles to go in the race, and it's obviously going to be a sprint to the finish line if everybody stays together. The heat just as intense as it has been all day, just the whisper of a breeze, hardly any breeze at all, certainly not enough to bother anybody out on the racetrack, and certainly not enough to make anybody comfortable around this point of the racetrack. Meantime, Bobby Allison pulls up alongside David Pearson, looking to go by him. He'd like to pass Richard Petty, too. He's making a run at him. They're hub to hub in the turn. It's greasy out there. Great piece of driving by both men as Allison slides in between them. So it's Petty, Allison, and Pearson at this point.
Petty, the all-time race winner on the NASCAR circuit, has looked very good today, has shown no signs of fatigue in this extremely hot day. Before the race today, we talked to him about that particular situation.
First of all, happy birthday, Richard. We understand you celebrated your 35th birthday 2 days ago. How tired are you getting, Richard?
Well, I'm not too tired right now. They asked me that after the race.
Seriously, Richard, in the past year, after some hot races, you've been prostrate, have had to have oxygen. Are you still the tiger you used to be?
Well, I doubt it, very seriously. I think that, everything catches up with people, but I still feel like I'm still winning as many races as anybody else, and as long as I can do that, I'll probably keep on running.
Of course, you get into a car race like this, heading toward a finish like we may very well have here, the old adrenaline gets pumping pretty well, and it'll keep you awake. Richard Petty in front, Bobby Allison in second, David Pearson running third. Now Allison moving out. He's again making a bid to pass Richard Petty out of the draft and gets him.
Well, this is really great automobile racing, Keith. The Daytona International Speedway was designed for two things, speed and competition, and we're seeing both today. There's Petty on the inside. How about this? Seesaw racing. The turns, banked 31 degrees, are flat. There is no dish or parabola to them, which means that a driver can go high without losing any maneuverability. Whereas in a parabolic banking, he has to stay in one lane. You can wander from top to bottom or from bottom to top here, pick a lane and use it. And that's what's great about Daytona. Talladega over in Alabama, where the 500 comes off on the 6th of August, is longer, steeper, wider, and even faster. And that should be a great one.
As you saw, Allison beat down the challenge of Petty to respond out of the draft and pass him. Now Bobby tries to stretch it out, and Petty pulls right back in behind him. In the meantime, David Pearson just sits right back there and watches them do their dance. We may very well be coming up toward a last lap draft, but we'll just wait and see as they work their way through traffic, and Allison goes inside, Petty goes outside on that one slow car. He probably thought a whirlwind had picked him up all of a sudden.
Really seeing some fine stock car racing competition on this racetrack. It was designed with three things in mind: safety, speed, and competition, and we're seeing all of that today. The remarkable thing about this aspect of the race is that any one of these three drivers seems to be able to go into the lead when he wants to, provided he gets a little bit of help from the car in front of him. Drafting, of course, is an important aspect of the competition here. Bobby Allison and I discussed this before the race.
Well, actually, you don't have to have any arrangement. You can draft about anybody. Some guys are a little harder to draft, or if they don't want to be drafted, they'll run low and then high and run all over on the track, which, especially if you're playing catch-up, it blows you around a little bit, makes it kind of squirrely.
Right now, three automobiles are running like they're on a string. No squirreling among any one of them, as Richard Petty now has the lead, with Bobby Allison running in second place and David Pearson running third. And Pearson has been cooling it back there in third spot for quite some time as Allison again pulls out. Now Pearson pulls out, you see. Both of them exercising the draft, and Allison has the lead with Petty falling back into second place. So as of the moment, it seems that David Pearson is content to continue in third place behind Petty and behind Bobby Allison.
Right now, Keith, is the thinking time. These drivers, who have great respect for one another, are relieved of one responsibility. They know that the other two fellows near them are not going to do anything untoward, anything surprising, or anything crazy. So they can drive a normal race and concentrate upon how they're going to finish.
It's now Petty, Allison, and Pearson, as Allison and Petty continue their swapping of the lead. Now here comes Pearson. Apparently David has decided now is a good time for him to get into the act, and so he passes Bobby Allison and takes second place, leaving Richard first. So now it is Pearson in that favorable drafting position, second place.
We have now had 20 exchanges of the lead in this Firecracker 400.
And if ever you have seen victory up for grabs in a stock car race, you're about to see it right here. Stay with us. The finish ought to be something to see. Well, the three-car duel continues as Bobby Allison in number 12, the Chevrolet, moves up on the outside, passes number 21, the Mercury, driven by David Pearson, but he cannot make it by 43, the Dodge, driven by Richard Petty. So it's Petty, Allison, and Pearson at this particular point. You know, it's interesting to me, the trust that exists between these three men. You certainly don't want to go out on a racetrack at this kind of speed and run this fast in these conditions unless you know what the other fella is going to do. An example of this is a conversation that Chris had earlier today with David Pearson when he talked about this very thing, about the men that he feels good running with.
Of course, I've always liked to run with Richard. I've run with Richard a long time, and I drove with him a lot. And it seems like that he does everything the same at every lap, and I can always depend on him, what he's going to do and everything. But some of the guys, when you follow them, you don't know what they're going to do. They might run in the corner deep one minute, and the next lap they might not. And like I say, with Richard and well, Allison is a good one to draft with. And anytime you run with guys like that, you know what they're going to do, and you can, after you follow them 3 or 4 laps, you can see what they're going to do, and they'll usually do the same every lap, and it's not hard to run with anybody like that.
It may not be hard to run with them, but they're running as hard right now as they can as the duel continues between Petty, Allison, and Pearson.
Running with them is one thing. Running by them is another thing, Keith. You know, the carburetor restrictions that were put into effect this year by NASCAR are shown right now in action. It's tremendous racing here, and no one seems to realize that it's 10 miles an hour slower than it was when the carburetors were unrestricted. But here we have 3 cars coming down to the wire virtually under a blanket.
Here comes Allison and Pearson, both of them making a move on Petty on the back straight. Allison pulls alongside, goes by him. Pearson's going by him, and suddenly, that quick, in the space of, 300 yards, Petty goes from first to third.
That was about a $10,000 look, with first place worth 16 and third worth 6 that Petty had of those 2 cars.
Now the question is, has Pearson moved into the spot where he wanted to be? Or does Allison have the horsepower and the car to stay out there in front?
The slower cars, the few that are left, Keith, are dotted around the track. They're not in a bunch. There's one here, one there, and they're all over. This may have an effect on these drivers' thinking.
But it should also be pointed out that these slower cars are behaving extremely well. They are getting out of the way, and here comes Pearson. And Pearson goes into first place. Allison is second and Petty third. So David Pearson, who sat for a long time in this tremendous 3-car duel back there in third spot, finally made his move. And now he has the lead in the Woods Brothers Mercury.
Well, of the 28 races that have gone before, historically, this would be the wrong move, for the second place man has always held the advantage. And there's Petty looking for a high groove on the track as they come down to get the 2 laps to go signal.
See that crowd, they're at attention. I think that's the first time today that anyone challenging for the lead among the top 7 or 8 automobiles that have run among the leaders all day, Chris, that anybody went up above to get a pass.
He was checking the track up there to see if it can be raced upon. Let's see now if he tries to use it. Glenn Wood, Pearson's car owner, has said the crew can do everything for the car, for the driver throughout most of the race, but when it comes down to the final moments, it then all becomes the driver's responsibility. And here they are now getting the white flag with 1 lap to go, and it's man against man at the Daytona Speedway.
Petty closing, Petty closing. Petty trying to get inside. Pearson kind of pinching him on the wall, but Richard went up high a few minutes ago to pass Allison, and he stays up high, but this time he cannot get by Pearson. It is now full floorboard, firewall, shove it, do everything you can, but make it run faster. It is Petty who is in that drafting posture as they whistle down the straight. Allison is also in drafting posture. Pearson up in front. He's the man who is cutting the groove in the heavy air, but he for a moment starts to pull it away, and now let's see if Petty can close it up again. Allison at this particular point does not look like he's got enough left to make a shot at him, and here they come for the checkered flag.
And there's not going to be a move. It's Pearson's race.
David Pearson wins it by about 3.5 or 4 feet. And the pit crew jumps for joy. Tremendous duel here at Daytona, with David Pearson winning just a few feet ahead of Richard Petty, and Bobby Allison finishes in third. We'll be back to talk to the winner in a moment. Well, there'll be a lot of that long green to pass around the Woods Brothers crew and David Pearson. $15,650 for sure, and perhaps some more. The speed, 160 plus, some 7 miles an hour off the existing record for the Firecracker 400, the record held by Cale Yarborough, set in 1968. And here goes car number 21, headed for Victory Lane. Running in second place at the finish was Richard Petty. Bobby Allison was third, Cuckoo Marlin 4, James Hilton 5, Leroy Yarborough 6, Ron Keselowski 7, and Donnie Allison finished in 8th place. Second place money for Richard Petty, $9,725. For Bobby Allison, third, $6,925. How could you have a better race than that, huh? And out comes the winner, David Pearson. And right there to talk with him, as soon as he catches his breath, is Chris Economaki. Here's your winner, David Pearson.
Congratulations, David. It was a hot one, wasn't it?
Yes, it was, Chris, and especially the last 5 laps there when Richard and Bobby were running so close to me. That was really hot laps.
When did you start planning the finish?
Well, we were all 3 there got together, and I seen then that there was no way that the third car could get by 2 cars at one time at the first lap. So I tried to be second. I really wanted to be second, but there at last, after we jackled around a little bit, back and forth, I saw some slow cars up ahead, so I said then at the last 5 laps that I better go ahead and get in front and hope to pick the draft from the slow cars and keep them behind.
You weren't worried about somebody using your draft to get by at the last moment?
Well, yes, but of course I was going to do them the same way. But there was some slow cars up in front of them, and I just figured that I could get their draft and be enough to hold them off, and luckily it was.
David, the last 50 miles showed that the 3 cars were equal. Each of you took the lead. So it boiled down not to a race among cars, but a race among men. And you won, and it must be a satisfying victory because of that.
Oh, yes, it is. In fact, you'd rather win this kind than any kind because it was close, and any one of the 3 could win the race.
Well, congratulations again on a tremendous victory in the Firecracker 400.
Thank you, Chris.
And back to you, Keith Jackson.